On today's show, he's one of the most popular players in Major League Baseball. He is the heart of the San Diego Padres, Fernando Tatis Jr., reviewing his season, the good, the bad, the in-between, where we're going forward. Is he a superstar anymore? All of these questions and more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, October 9th. Realizing now I might have said for yesterday, October 9th, but whatever, Thursday, October 9th. I, as always, am your host with sometimes, clearly, not always the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for nearly 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but various other outlets, including JustBaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Go check that out. And today's episode, we are doing our first of what will be many player reviews for the offseason, the 2025 season review for Fernando Tatis Jr. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, give my conclusion about him overall as a player, the big question, I think, that's on everybody's mind. And he is the most famous player, so he is rightfully the player that we're going to start this series off with. And I'm going to start off the show by saying this. We must answer a comment, right? And a lot of these comments have been floating out for a while now. Of a variation of this. At Chase Leopold says, Tatis is not a star. What planet are you on? A lot of the comments saying, yep, Tatis and Machado are nothing without roids. Yeah, he's a bum, blah, 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 blah. So this is the thing. Is Tatis not a star, right? Is he Yasiel Puig? Is he, I can't think of a better one right now. Like players who just have more attention than they have on-field value, right? They're just a little bit more famous than they are, right? Trevor Bauer, another example, infamous, right? In that case, right? So let's get into it. Let's first start talking about Tatis when it comes to the good. This year, Fernando Tatis Jr., he slashed .268 with a .368 on base, a .446 slugging, had a WRC plus of 131. Remember, WRC plus 100 is average. 131 would make him 31% at better than your league average kind of hitter, which is very, very good. That's all-star level, and finished with 6.1 wins above replacement. So, let me tell you, overall this year, Fernando Tatis Jr. was an all-around very good player if you just look at the basic numbers, right? In terms of wins above replacement, Fernando Tatis Jr. finished 10th this year, behind only Francisco Lindor, Jose Ramirez, Corbin Carroll, Trey Turner, Geraldo Perdomo, Shohei Ohtani, Bobby Witt Jr., Cal Raleigh, and Aaron Judge. That's pretty dang good company. So immediately, my response to people saying he's not a star, well, he is kind of in that way. The difference is, which we're going to get to in the second segment, what happened with his batting, right? What happened in that regard? But before we get into that, there was so many positives, right? Firstly, this year, the walk rate, right? That is probably one of the best things that happened to him when it comes to offense in his season, right? A 12.9% walk rate, by far the highest of his career, and much higher than his previous 2 seasons when we started seeing him strike out a little bit less, but at the cost of the fact that he wasn't walking more. So he kind of decreased in that area. So we're wondering, is he too impatient? Is this a bad development? Well, that's higher, 7.3% last year and 8.3% in 2023. So that was a nice positive development for him. And this is also a pretty huge development, in my opinion, because it shows if Tatis isn't the Ken Griffey Jr. masher that we expected and saw early in his career, a 150 WRC plus each of his first 3 seasons, right? 42 home runs in 2021, 22 home runs in 84 games in 2019, 17 in 59 games in 2020, right? And by the way, like, that's not necessarily, like, what's the word? Like, he wasn't necessarily better those years, by the way, but in terms of that overall, the plate discipline that we saw this year is a good sign that if he is not the Ken Griffey Jr. masher, you'll always be able to kind of rely on, well, he's got a good eye at the plate. He's going to put together productive at-bats. He's going to get on base, and that matters. We love on base, right? Shout out Billy Beane. We love Buddy Ball. We love getting on base. The next positive is that defense. He was incredible this year, and that's why he had such a high finish in his wins above replacement, or at least a big part of it. Yes, he only had 25 home runs, but he also swiped 32 bags, and because of the defense, that contributed to why he had such an effective year. In terms of all qualified outfielders this year, in terms of defensive runs saved and outs above average, Fernando Tatis Jr. ranked really, really high. For those who don't know, those are really good advanced stats that do a better job than just fielding percentage and errors, right? Than telling you what the best defenders are. If you want to leave a comment asking why, we can answer that in another episode, right? But in terms of defensive runs saved, Fernando Tatis Jr. was 5th behind only Wyatt Langford of the Texas Rangers, Adolis Garcia of the Texas Rangers as well, Kadane Rafael of the Red Sox, and Stephen Kwan of the Cleveland Guardians in that category amongst all outfielders. And then outs above average, which is arguably even more important, Fernando Tatis Jr. finished 10th among all players, tied with Michael Harris II. Wyatt Langford, Corbin Carroll, Andy Pages, Julio Rodriguez, Kyle Isbell, Jacob Young, Victor Scott, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Kadane Rafael are the only players that finished higher. I.e., Tatis is a very good defender. And if you limit this, by the way, to not just outfield, but just right field, Tatis is basically one of the best defensive players at his position in Major League Baseball. And he's done this before, too, so we can say probably not a fluke. Last year, with his advanced analytics in the defense, probably more of a fluke. Getting to the ball a little bit weird, didn't have so many opportunities. This year, he was 2nd and outs above average among all right fielders, with only Corbin Carroll finishing better. And Corbin Carroll, Tatis had more defensive runs saved. And I think that showed his arm. Those jumping catches that he made. How many home runs did we see him get robbed this year? Right? I saw him do it in person in that Mets game that Elias Diaz had the walk-off in, right? He robbed potentially like a home run from Mark Vientos. Incredible stuff from the boy. He was amazing. He has the speed. He is an all-around very good player in that respect, right? And also, more positives. We're not done yet. He still crushes fastballs. So for everybody wondering sometimes why they put him leadoff, one of the reasons is because he crushes fastballs, which is what pitchers tend to throw more of because they don't want to put a guy who's as fast as Tatis on the bases to start off a game. So he's seeing a lot of fastballs, and he's still killing it. This year, hitting 331 against them and slugging 529. Right? That is still very good. Lots of goods for Tatis, man. He still crushes fastballs, and also he stayed really healthy. This was the most games he's ever played in a season, his whole career. And by the way, if you're wondering, still very good clutch stats in terms of high leverage situations this year, right? Which is not scoring position, but it just means like the big game on the line, game-changing moments, right? Which isn't as many times as runners in scoring position, but still. He finished 18th in WRC plus 183 in high leverage situations this year. There's some crazy ones, and that's technically tends to be a spot in which players, it vacillates year to year, the high leverage numbers and whatnot, but he was still very, very clutch this year, right? And that is something that he deserves a lot of credit for. So, the WAR, the fact that he played in more games than ever, the fact that he was an electric defender, the fact that he was healthier than ever, like all these different things round out to be the 10th best position player in Major League Baseball potentially. And that absolutely constitutes a star. However, if you want to get into semantics, is he no longer a superstar? That, my friends, is a lot more complicated of a question to answer. But before we attempt to answer it, guys, let me just take a second to talk to you about one of our sponsors, and that is our friends over at Rugiet. Because here's the thing, guys. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. That's where they come in. It's not just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. The effects can last up to 36 hours, confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. It's a simple process too. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door and also directly. But discreetly and directly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the second segment of this here podcast. Locked On Padres. Go follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO if you'd like. And also subscribe wherever you want and leave your comments on whatever I'm saying in the comments section of this video. I'll try to get back to you, especially for the Monday mailbag. Although I'll be answering questions all the time, frankly, because it's the offseason, so it'll be part of the plans. Why not? But as I said before the break, the big question is not whether or not he's a star player. Like, again, 10th in wins above replacement, guys. He is an all-around player. But we got to talk about if he's a superstar player, and that leads into the bad of Fernando Tatis Jr.'s season, which there was also plenty of to discuss, right? First of all, the playoffs. I know, right? He was great in the regular season in high leverage, and by the way, he's been awesome throughout his career. Remember, prior to this playoff season, Fernando Tatis Jr. had the highest OPS in the history of Major League Baseball in the postseason. This guy is rocking a 1,500 OPS. So it was his first bad one. It happens. It's not an indictment on him as a player, especially because he had been good before. We get on Manny Machado because he's only basically had one postseason where he was just better than an average player, right? So that's why we get on him, not Tatis. But still, he had a bad playoffs, right? And you got to talk about that. The next thing, and dare I say the most important thing, is that the slugging was completely absent this year. Yes, 25 home runs is nothing to laugh at, nothing to sneeze at, but it's also because he played a lot of games this year, right? In terms of his OPS by month, and more importantly, his slugging, he looked like an MVP the first month of the year. He had 7 home runs, he slashed 323 with a 394 on base and a 591 slugging. 986 OPS. Then, what happened? His slugging percentage by month. In May, 369. In June, 337. In July, 473. It looks like he was back. Then, 355 in August. And then, again, looked like he was back. 549 in September. We don't really know what happened. And considering that his main things, right, the main numbers, when you go to Baseball Savant, in expected batting average, in hard hit rate, he's in the 93rd percentile. In average exit velocity, he's in the 95th percentile. But he was 66th percentile in barrel rate, which isn't bad, but it shows you he was unable to lift the ball for extra bases more than usual, and that raises a lot of questions because these past couple years, last year we got to say, you know what, he got banged up, and every time it looked like he was rolling, he landed back on the injury reserve list, whatever it's called, right? But we at least got to see he went nuts in the postseason, right? So clearly that power, that Griffey ability was there, but he did not deliver this year, right? And one thing that I did see this year that was a little bit concerning and may show off his weaknesses is his ability to hit stuff on the top of the zone. We talked about this a lot this year, but I just want to illustrate it for people who are watching on video. In the top middle of the strike zone, top left and top right is what I'm aiming at here. Top middle, he was okay. But top left, he had a 33% whiff rate, and top right, a 42% whiff rate. Combine that with the fact that he also whiffed on stuff low and away and low and inside, outside the zone. You basically had a player that just couldn't always put it together, and it looked like he was a guy who pitchers knew how to attack more than previous years. Right? It looked like they were like, all right, throw it up here, especially if you're a lefty, and he's not going to be able to reach out. He's not going to be able to adjust in time with his stance or whatever it is to get to the ball and hit it for power. Right? That's what we saw this year. He was whiffing at those pitches basically all season long and was unable to produce in that respect. Right? So that was a concerning thing. The other concerning thing, which also plays into these whiffs on top of the zone, is that he couldn't hit off-speed pitches or breaking pitches this year, and this was the first year in which that was kind of a problem. Right? 2023, he struggled a little bit with off-speed pitches. He hit 220, but his expected number is 259 expected batting average. But for the most part, this is kind of like, dang, you really struggled there. Is it possible that this was a sign of something greater? He hit 213 against breaking pitches and 138. That's the big number against off-speed pitches. He could not adjust to that stuff. Killed the fastball still, but he could not adjust to that. So, not great. Right? You don't like to see that from the guy who's your leadoff hitter, just struggling a lot, and it looked like a player that batters knew how to attack when it came down to it, right? Also, he had the lowest pulled air ball rate of his career, and it's gone down every year since 2021, right? Specifically 22.2%, which was great, right? In 2021. That's amazing. Then 15.1, 14.5, and then 12% this year. And he also saw an increase in his ground ball percentage, getting to 49%. Now, here's the thing. With the pulled air percentage, let me just let you guys know, most of the time, that's a good thing. Is if you're pulling the ball, which most hitters are going to do, that's just how batting works. If you can put it into the air, that usually is a good sign that you're going to end up hitting a lot of home runs. Putting the ball in the air more, especially when you're hitting it hard, is usually a sign of more home runs due. And he didn't do that this year, right? And it's gone down every year. which is why it is unfortunately a little bit justified to say, hey, maybe he's not a superstar player anymore. Maybe it's possible that the PEDs is something that we can't easily dismiss anymore. In my opinion, I've always brought up that there are plenty of other players who have declined after an amazing start to their career. Look at Michael Harris, right? Look at Alek Manoah, right? That does not mean that all of a sudden we just have to assume that it was steroids that kept them up there. Hey, if you want to bring up Jurickson Profar, oh, well, Jurickson Profar, that's why he had such a great year. Maybe that's why he had such an extra great year. But Jurickson Profar, by the way, this year, 122 WRC plus in the 80 games he played, like almost 1.5 wins above replacement. And he also hit 14 home runs. He had his moments. Like, as a batter, he was still good this year. And a player that the Padres might desperately miss. So all of that combined, basically to summarize, is just the guy lost the power. And it looked like a player that is just not the Griffey guy that we thought he was going to be. And he was really inconsistent with the power. He was always walking, which was great. But it would be unfair for me not to bring up. Heading into this year, we talked about the PED thing, a 100% drop in OPS since the PED suspension. And we said, this is kind of a make or break year in terms of dispelling all those concerns. We saw him perform in the playoffs. We saw him perform at times this year, especially at the beginning of the year. Is this a player who's just very, very good and absolutely worth his contract? Or is he a generational player? After this year, you kind of have to say he's not that generational player. And that's okay to a degree. That's okay. But it is disappointing. And it is especially disappointing considering that this Padres team does not have a lot of slug. Even if Jackson Merrill is great next year, which I think he will be, he's not necessarily a guy who's going to hit 30 home runs. He might just stumble into it one year, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for like 19, 20 home runs from Jackson Merrill, and then a bunch of extra base hits and great defense and great speed, all that sort of stuff. Right? But when it comes to power, in that regard, that's something that the Padres were sorely missing, and you saw it in the playoffs. It's just a team that, like, when you need the big hit, you can't rely on that. You're playing small ball, and it's an approach that I do not agree with. I feel like we've seen, don't get me wrong, you don't want to go too power heavy and just always rely on pull stuff like the Yankees do with the short porch in Yankee Stadium. But unfortunately, the naysayers did win a little bit with Fernando Tatis Jr. this year, but it is also true that you have to bring up that, you know, with his hard hit stuff, can he turn it around? I'm not entirely sure. It's a really big question, but in my opinion, not one that is going to matter as much for the Padres as a whole, but for him it absolutely does. But man, that power being absent was rough. There were times, guys, throughout this year where he only had a couple home runs. In the month of August, he had 1. In June and July, he had 2, right? That's really bad. Then he had 7 in September, so I don't know what happened. He showed signs, but overall, the swing and miss stuff, the fact that he was hitting the ball into the ground, he was not launching it the way he usually does, it was concerning and a really bad development for Tatis going forward. But folks, let me talk to you before we get into the final part of this episode, before we give my concluding thoughts on Fernando Tatis Jr. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, right? You guys agree, right? There's nothing like it. It's fantastic. Catching any sporting event live is great. And with Game Time, they make tickets buying easier. It's great because there's all sort of tough things with buying tickets. The queues, the surprise fees, all of that stuff. And with Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans, you don't have to worry about that, right? Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time Guarantee, the double G. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best prices. Plus, all fees are included up front, so you know that the price you see is the price you will pay. I love the zone deals. You pick a section. They have all sort of different ways to save for you guys. You can view, also, by the way, your exact view from your seat, like before you buy. That's awesome. Really, really good. The zone deals, pick a section. They pick the seats. You get a discount. It's great. It's the least stressful way that I've ever done, that I've ever gone about buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. Download Game Time today. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod to be better than the Padres themselves, as you know. I usually save that for the end, though. I don't know why I did it there. But remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Leave any comments in the comment section on YouTube, and I'll try to get back to you. But concluding thoughts on Fernando Tatis Jr. for his season of 2025. Here's what I'll say. The numbers are still there power-wise, right? The numbers are still there. The hard hit rate's there. The expected batting average is there, right? His expected batting average was actually 283. His expected slug was 506. His weighted on base was great. This was the third year in a row in which his weighted on base was behind and trailed behind his expected weighted on base, right? By a significant margin too, not just by like 3 points, by like 30 points. The numbers are there. And I could see a world in which Tatis spends the offseason the same way he did this year with the wider stance, changing his stance and all that. It's possible an offseason of adjusting to the potential adjustments that pitchers made, right? We talked about this in the second segment. Maybe pitchers were figuring out a certain way to go about attacking him on top of the zone and with off-speed pitches that started to work, right? Maybe they have more tape on him. They have more game film, whatever you want to call it. There's also going to be plenty of folks in his corner, not just from the team, but hey, his dad, Fernando Tatis Jr., Sr., right? I think that the 40-plus home run guy could still be in there somewhere. And this is going to come off as hate, and it is hate. It absolutely is. But as I illustrated earlier, with his numbers against off-speed pitches, with the strike zone stuff, his walk rate spiked very dramatically with runners in scoring position. And in total, this year, it jumped to 20%, his walk rate with runners in scoring position. And over the last 3 months of the season, it jumped to 28%. So here's what I'm saying. Is it possible, with how much we saw Fernando Tatis Jr. this year, is it possible, again, possible, that maybe he saw more breaking pitches this year? He also saw more off-speed pitches, a jump by 3% in the off-speed pitches, a jump by 2% in the breaking pitches. Is it possible, I repeat, possible, that Luis Arraez being behind him in the order made it that with all of his struggles, with the fact that they might have figured out on top of the zone, with all of that, they would never give him stuff to hit, right? Is it possible that with the walk rate, he was like, I'm not getting anything to hit because Arraez is behind me and I crush fastballs and maybe they're not giving me fastballs. There was a lot of times this year when you saw low and away, maybe on top of the zone, right? You saw that a lot because maybe they just weren't afraid of the rest of this lineup, especially Luis Arraez. I do not think that that is an entirely coincidence. So could a new number 2 hitter help? Giving Tatis a little bit, because if you walk him, it's like, oh God, we might have to face Ryan O'Hearn. He could put the ball in the seats. He could also draw a walk very easily. It's not an easy at bat with a player like an Arraez who has a really poor approach, right? This is what we've talked about like basically all year. Is it possible there? It's also possible that, hey, his home run fly ball rate was down. For those who don't know, that's one of the like initial stats you can look at. That if you put the ball in the air a lot, that maybe if a lot of them didn't leave the park, they tend to leave the park when you go year to year. That's just something that can happen, right? It's a little bit more bad ball luck. It's possible. It's possible. It's possible. But I will say that with the weighted on base thing that I brought up earlier, the third year in a row, your expected stats were better than your regular stats. That tells me there's something a little bit deeper going on here. With Tatis's plate approach, not pulling the ball as much as he should be, it just makes me wonder. It makes me wonder. But for all of these reasons I illustrated, I think it's possible that maybe he just has a year where he hits 40. But I do think we need to really stop thinking that that's just what he is regularly or could be regularly. Again, it might just happen one year. There are players that have 35 plus home run seasons that lucked into it or just had a good season, right? But that's not their overall profile, right? I can't think of one off the top of my head right now. Heck, maybe Profile last year. But I just think that when you combine the defense with the base running, with his ability to draw walks, what you have here is a 6-win player. And a 6-win player is an all-star. And a fringe. Remember that we have a demigod in the National League. So that's not a Tatis, right? A fringe MVP quality player. I still think that's what we get. But without the offense being there, it's possible that, like we saw in 2024, where the defense, he didn't make maybe as many crazy jumping catches, as many great routes to the ball, throw out as many runners, all of that stuff, that maybe he doesn't add as much defensively. It looks like he's a good player in that regard, but it's possible those numbers go down a little bit. But I will say, it has to be mentioned, with the contract, right? Fernando Tatis Jr. is under contract for a long time. right? And I mean a long time. I'm actually looking at it right now. What was it again? I always forget like how long he's under contract because it's been so long. He's under contract until 2035. If Fernando Tatis Jr. is a 5-6 win player who gets you a lot of walks, he can get you 25 home runs, play really great defense, have some speed, all that stuff, that's worth the contract they gave him, right? But we were hoping that we got a steal with that contract. And in my opinion, this isn't as much of a steal. This is just a really good player. You know what I mean? This is an all-star caliber player. Probably could have been the starting all-star player. But I don't know if he's quite an MVP guy. I do not think he's Griffey Jr. anymore. Or at least for the time being, we cannot treat him as such. And it's unfortunate because I love Tatis. And I think that Tatis is sometimes getting a bad rap. Right? I really do. I think sometimes people look at him and say, wow, the slug is totally gone, so he must be bad. Remember, for casual fans, defense isn't something that you can always see, right? You would think that after this year with all the whole run robberies, maybe people could see that. And I grant you that maybe a lot of the naysayers are just Dodgers fans who don't watch the team. They just like to hate on the team. I'm almost at a loss for words because I just kind of think that it's a little sad to see what's happened to Tatis, but at the same time, I still think that a star player, a 6-win player, is still really good and worth the money. And there's still the potential that he figures things out. There's also players that go through rough patches who figure it out the next year. 25 home runs and 32 steals, 260, 360 on base. Great defense. And a guy that we've still seen can be really clutch. He wasn't in the postseason this year, but he's been clutch in the postseason in the past. And in high leverage situations, he was the 18th best in high leverage situations among all position players in the big, big, big moments. I still think this is a guy who rises to the occasion. But the playoffs did also make me wonder, did pitchers say, well, we know how to attack this guy now, so this is what we're going to do. And the walk won't kill us because they have a rise second. And it's for that arise reason. It's for the reason of, you know, the slug, the fact that I still love that his baseball font is bleeding red, that I still believe in the guy, but all in all, not a disappointing year for Tatis, but it is a year that changed our perception of him, a perception-changing year for Fernando Tatis Jr. is the TLDR, TLDL in this case, that I would say for Fernando Tatis Jr. And lastly, if you guys are worried about this, like the Padres are screwed if he can't be the Griffey anymore, he is not the problem with the Padres. There are other guys who have less wins above replacement. Look, Kyle Schwarber, he's not a two-way player, but he hit a lot of home runs. You can find guys, or you have to hope that the Padres find guys that are flawed players that could just hit for power and cover that aspect of the team building. Because if Tatis can't do it, he's doing so much else that it's wrong to get mad at him, right? It's like getting mad at Joe Burrow because the rest of the team is bad. Like, actually, you know what would help Joe Burrow and the Bengals? Better defensive players, a better O-line, right? That's how I feel about Tatis, if that makes any sense. But with that all being said, everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow myself on Twitter/X and Blue Sky at Javapeno, JAVIIPENO, if you'd like, when I finally get back active on there. Leave your comments in the YouTube, Locked On Padres on YouTube. Whatever you want to, you could ask me about my favorite movie lately. I don't care, because it's the off season officially. You guys could ask me about what are each of my little trinkets back in my video setup. Whatever you want, go for it. And of course, Padres questions too, because it's going to be a big off season, or at least a long off season with a lot of questions. And until that next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, Manny Machado player review coming tomorrow. Take care.